All right. It appears all the buttons and knobs are still working from yesterday.
Alert.
The day
Alert.
before. I hope everybody's had a Merry Christmas. So I guess Happy Boxing Day. What is Boxing Day anyway?
You have to ask Viva. I have no idea. He's wearing our swag apparently today.
I saw
Twitter,
that.
which is very nice.
I definitely saw that. Looks great. What was it? I showed it to Leslie and she said, well, he's very comfortable with his masculinity.
What do you mean? Because he has what?
He had on a pink beanie.
With
the tassel on the top.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
It's the least of his problems.
Well, somebody wrote back under the tweet saying, did he tuck his man bun up through the hole on the beanie?
Dude, you got me. I mean, that top is top heavy. I mean, with the hair and everything else, that guy could topple over with a stiff wind. I think he was going into some creek to swim with his wife or something. I didn't really follow the storyline. I'm more involved in my own storyline, but man, I've had this cold, Eric, for 27 days now. And second, I've done antibiotics. I took the prednisone, and now it's just down to shortness of breath and a little tiny cough. But holy crap, whatever the hell's going on, if anybody knows what remedy to take for the final stages of this death disease, please let me know so I can go out with dignity and grace.
Hopefully, it'll wear off. I don't know. I've had that kind of up and down, like just tired.
I am just beat from this thing.
That's crazy.
Whatever it was, I got it in Dallas. Just so you know, in case I die, I'm going to blame the city of Dallas, and you can't say that Dallas doesn't love you, Mr. Grobert.
Okay, we got a couple of pieces of advice in here. One, it's a good point. Are you taking a vitamin D?
Yeah.
Okay, and then somebody else said zinc small dose.
I'm taking zinc big dose.
Okay. Well,
yeah,
got that covered.
I'm into zinc. I mean, there's just not. I mean, I went through a Z-Pack. I went through prednisone. There's nothing left on the earth. There's no point even going to see my doctor.
Sauna.
I did the sauna. Thank you very much, Steve. Nice try. I'll be doing the sauna Thursday again. Another feeble attempt. Boy, when the Chinese come up with something, they test it out on a lot of people before they send it over.
Apparently. No, this isn't good advice. John Belushi took something.
Oh, yeah, he took something. Oh, yeah. We watched, unpleasantly, so many weird movies. I watched, which I'd never seen, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. What? Possibly one of the worst films ever made. I never saw it. I mean, I saw European Vacation. I saw the, obviously, Vacation. Mm-hmm. Both written by John Hughes around 1984, before, like a year before I got there. I think one was written in 1981, which was Vacation 58, I think was the original title in Lampoon in the magazine by Hughes. But holy crap, is this a bad movie. But the odd thing is they replaced the kids, and the daughter is now a very uncomfortable Juliette Lewis, who looks like she doesn't want to be there. Born into Scientology, by the way, Juliette Lewis.
Oh, well, she looks uncomfortable in a lot of her movies.
Yeah, Cape Fear particularly. And,
yeah, definitely. And also Natural Born Killers.
But she's great if you like, if you want that kind of a character. But she was playing this, 13-year-old girl. It was just, and then Randy Quaid shows up again. I went, oh my God, how did he get back into this movie?
Well, Randy Quaid's a classic. Well, anyway, everybody, again, Merry Christmas. Great to have you. Great to see you here. We're just doing a Q&A because we didn't want to do anything heavy. We weren't even going to do a show. Mark felt sorry for me. So
I did, but now I feel sorry for me. I'll just put this out there just to open the show. I found out the nickname for Madeline Brown by LBJ. If anybody knows the nickname, you can put it up in the comment section right now. I'll wait
All right. And while you're thinking of that, as we do with these Q&As, it's very helpful. Please write the word question or Q or something to flag that it is a question. As time goes on, I won't be able to get to all of them, but I will try to get to what I can.
I'll answer my own question a little later. But one thing I found, I forgot that I remembered.
Bird brain.
No, not quite, Freddie. Not quite. You know the name of the motel where Bobby Baker and LBJ ran the girls there in Maryland? It was in Ocean City, Maryland.
Yeah.
I always found this to be odd. It was called the Carousel Club Motel. Where they dropped the club, but it was the Carousel. What are the odds of that? The two clubs involved in this, the two names being involved, Carousel, 2,000 miles away from each other.
Kind of weird.
Yeah.
Kind of weird for sure.
Yeah. Oh, to answer my own question, it was Pussy Galore. I swear to God, that was LBJ's nickname for her, Madeline Brown. Pussy Galore.
That is funny. All right. Well, here, let's jump right in here. Question: other than JFK, which other murders did LBJ have a possible motive to be involved?
Well, the 17, according to Billy Saul Estes, but the number one murder you could talk about is Henry Marshall, who's killed, most people believe by Mac Wallace because he was going to blow the whistle. And apparently LBJ's style was to pay them, and if they refused to take the payment, then to kill them. First to talk to them, then to pay them, and then to threaten them, and then to kill them. So maybe it was a 4-stage approach. Henry Marshall from the Department of Agriculture, who was inspecting the grain silos that Billy Saul Estes had emptied. LBJ was a master of government fraud. That was how he made his millions, from the actual government money itself, not outside stuff. Although I will say this, to get in any kind of defense contract, you had to go through LBJ, the master of the Senate, to get anything approved. So he would take, this is how it worked, the physics. I'm always into the physics of it. Bobby Baker would go, again, like I said, to the Carousel Motel in Ocean City, Maryland, right? And they would meet in a room, and you had to pay $25,000 to get in, to see if you can bribe LBJ. LBJ would say nothing. He wouldn't shake the man's hand. He would let Bobby Baker do the talking. You had to pay the $25,000 in advance to get in. And it was basically for a small defense contract. It was $50,000 in cash. So it was 25 plus 25 to get your thing in there. And that was the physics of it. I'm always interested in the physics, how it worked. There was a bunch of people running money. Obviously, Connolly handled a ton of money. So did Ed Clark, as attorney out of Boston. But back east, for a defense contract, they would go to that motel.
Awesome. And I was just thinking, somebody else said it in the chat, but it sounds like his style was the same as Pablo Escobar. Plata o plomo.
I don't know.
Silver or lead. So
no, but what I'm saying is he had other stages. He wasn't Pablo Escobar. There was the talking stage. There was other stages. It wasn't that brutal, Eric. He wasn't Pablo Escobar.
Oh,
it's hard to function in D.C. as Pablo Escobar, the senator.
Well, at least it would be clean. I'm not your buddy guy. What do you think drove LBJ?
Obviously, there's multiple things. Obviously, megalomaniacal power, but Henry Luce's Life magazine that was coming out December 1st with the Bobby Baker scandal, and the Billy Saul Estes stuff was coming out on the 1st. That issue was pulled and destroyed by Henry Luce, and LBJ's close friend was Claire Booth Luce, the wife of Henry Luce. And Claire Booth Luce and Henry Luce were arch anti-communist. So not only did they pull the December 1st issue, they purchased the Zapruder film and buried it for 17 years to help LBJ. They kind of did their bidding overnight when he became president. I mean, you'll see if we ever get to the AI version of my LBJ script, there's a whole scene in there with Don Johnson the salesman who was testifying behind closed doors at the time of the assassination against LBJ, the vice president, for taking kickbacks himself. And he pulls the plug and leaves when it's announced that LBJ became president. And they said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "It's one thing to testify against the vice president. It's quite a difference to testify against the president." And he gathered up his documents and left with his lawyers. A guy who had been one of the many people who had paid kickbacks to the Johnson crime family. It's kind of like Biden. I mean, a lot of ways, it's very similar. His brother was involved. Sister was doing certain things, but he had this little group around him of Cliff Carter and Walter Jenkins and Busby. Horace Busby was another money guy for him. And a lot of these guys, you know, just he didn't have to say anything. They knew what their job was. They had been with him for years. They knew how to run the machine.
All right. Lindsay Mans, let's $5 this to death. Love you both, and thanks so much for all the content. We will happily take a $5, $10, $2.
By the way, LBJ was, you know, it's funny because we were talking about this Trump impersonator last week. Mm-hmm. One of the greatest impersonators in Washington was LBJ. He was able to do every major figure in the government and put on a one-man show when he was drinking privately with people, doing all of them talking to each other. Wow. People don't realize that about LBJ. It's brought to mind. I remembered it because of the incredible, important interview that Tucker Carlson did on Christmas Day.
That was classic, dude.
With Kevin Spacey as Frank Underwood, playing an LBJ character, who is what Frank Underwood was. A version of LBJ. Don't forget the Robert Caro books are stacked up as props on his desk, and that's who his mentor is in theory. You know, in the world that he's in. But yeah, Kevin Spacey doing that voice again was really hysterical. Doing Frank Underwood.
Yeah, and I did not expect that. You know, that was so.
No, I didn't. I was expecting some kind of political candidate who may or may not jump into the ring. I was not expecting that.
It was well done.
Right.
Christopher Troska, speaking of Caro, is Robert Caro a deep state?
I don't know. I mean, he doesn't want to go as far as involving him in the assassination, but you know, I'm reading this book by Paul Blau and James DiEugenio, the choke points of the assassination, and there's not even a chapter on LBJ, and that's a book that came out 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, you want to blame Robert Caro? I mean, look at DiEugenio and Paul. They don't even, and Oliver Stone. They won't even acknowledge any involvement with LBJ other than, you know, a cover up for his own betterment.
Yeah, very true. And somebody else asked about that. I'm going to jump to it because it's still related. Why has there been such a huge delay in Robert Caro's final tome on LBJ? Has it perchance anything to do with your own research into this nasty bastard? I'm wondering if he may like set it to post posthumously, and maybe he'll say, "Oh, by the way, LBJ might have done it."
I highly doubt that at this point for his legacy. I mean, it's all about legacy with these cats. And he had to find a new publisher. Apparently the publisher, whatever he had, didn't want to publish it. So he had to shop it around, got a smaller advance, I imagine, which is going to take him longer. He's older now. I think there's a number of factors. His books are really long as a factor. I highly doubt he's going to come out after, you know, all these multiple volumes and say that LBJ did it. But I just want to mention the ladies of LBJ. I think there's a new one that I found. Virginia Dore is one of them. I don't know if I ever mentioned Nancy Dickerson before. The incredible Nancy Dickerson. I think I did mention her. Who else was I thinking of? Yolanda Boozer, who I talked about. Oh, there was a new one called Ashton Gonella, who was 20. These are secretaries who work for LBJ that he had intimate relationships with. He also, I found out of late, him and Bobby Baker owned a abortion clinic in Puerto Rico where they'd send the girls on holiday when they had to get their situation rectified.
Well,
in San Juan. In San Juan.
He definitely keeps them going. Stanley Hoover, what is your opinion of the reclaiming history work?
What is reclaiming history? I forget. Remind me.
I think that's Eugenio.
Reclaiming history.
Isn't that Eugenio?
Reclaiming parkland, or
it might be reclaiming parkland and kind of rolling it together.
He'd have to be more specific, I think.
All right. Well, Dick Dickerson's coming in hot. Guess I'll start with a stupid question. Two-parter. Should LBJ have been charged with war crimes for Vietnam? And secondly, how could he get away with all of his crimes? Did he have the DOJ by the nuts? Please don't tear my head off, Mark.
Wait a minute. That's 3 questions. It's not a two-parter, Dickerson. It's so funny because I was just mentioning Nancy Dickerson, your mother, your brother, obviously John Dickerson, who was famously lost a job as a CBS anchorman. I think he was then relegated to Sunday morning. He was supposed to be the new anchorman, and they gave it to who's ever there now. Dickerson got dicked by CBS, and long time employee of CBS Evening News, John Dickerson. His mother, Nancy Dickerson, who went to the University of Wisconsin, was a Badger a beauty queen. Was the first woman anchor or on-air anchor / for NBC News, and she was stunning. And LBJ had his way with her in the hotel here in Los Angeles, like he did with a friend of mine named Roz Wyman, the late Roz Wyman, who recently passed away a year ago, who used to take me to the Dodger games. She explained, when I was researching the LBJ script, I found out that LBJ's MO was to buy them a bathing suit and then have them try it on in front of him. I guess people do that with lingerie today, but his MO was the bathing suit. And hold on, I want to go back to that question in a second. Just when I finish this Roz Wyman bit. So I was at the playoff game with Roz Wyman, and I said, I had recently in the research come across her name. She was the head of the Democratic Party in Los Angeles. She was the youngest city council person in LA history. She brought the Dodgers from Brooklyn here. Her husband was the chairman of the state Democratic Party. So they were pretty big fish. And she was a chairwoman of the Hillary Clinton campaign. Anyway, so I said, I understand that you went shopping with LBJ. And she said, what? And I said, yeah, I read it somewhere when the 1960 campaign was in town. She goes, yeah, I did. I said, did he buy you a bathing suit? And there was a long pause. And she said, yes, he did. I go, did you try it on? Another long pause. And she said, yes, I did. And I just cracked up. And that was a signal that she had become another victim of the spoils of victory, as press secretary his own press secretary, George Reedy, said in his memoirs. Sex was to LBJ the spoils of victory, which is a great line. George Reedy said that. George Reedy did not like LBJ. He had a couple of different press secretaries, George Reedy being one of them. But even Walter Jenkins, who was famously arrested in the YMCA for blowing a retired Polish serviceman in a hole, was arrested by the FBI. Jenkins said that Johnson drank a fifth of Cutty Sark a day. Others said 2/5 of Cutty Sark a day. And I believe when he said a day, he meant in the day. Because it was everybody else has reported that he drank 2/5 during a 24-hour period. So Jenkins might have been saying that he drank a fifth of Cutty Sark during the day, which is kind of an enormous amount. But it's funny, there's Walter Jenkins outed as even though I think he had like 7 kids and a wife, he was, there's a famous call between Hoover and LBJ just about Jenkins, because this is 1964 during the campaign against Barry Goldwater. And he believes that Goldwater is trying to destroy his campaign with dirty tricks, that Jenkins is not homosexual. And Hoover, a semi-known homosexual, has to explain to Johnson, unbeknownst to Johnson, that they had arrested Jenkins a couple of years back for the same thing. So Johnson blows his stack saying, why the fuck am I the last person to know this? And and then he goes and he does the famous thing with he makes Hoover do the dance and walk around the Oval Office as a gay man to show how he's able to tell that someone's gay. And he does a limp-wristed walk across the Oval Office, Hoover, and LBJ knows it's being taped. And he does it intentionally to Hoover. Then he asks Hoover to find out who is gay in the Goldwater campaign so he could do the same thing to the Goldwater campaign. And Hoover says, I can't find anyone. And he's telling him, you're not digging hard enough. There must be somebody. This is how liberal LBJ was. He was determined to crush, and he was ahead in the polls by 9 million points, but nevertheless, he wanted, complete destruction. It was an interesting thing because at this point in his career, he does not trust the Secret Service, and rightfully so, because why would he trust the Secret Service? He knows what happened with JFK with the Secret Service. So he tells Hoover that he wants the FBI to go with him, not the Secret Service. The only guy he trusts is Rufus Youngblood, the guy who was sitting in the car with him in the passenger seat, that Secret Service agent, but he doesn't trust Rowley because he knows they were compromised during the JFK assassination. But here's something new that I learned. He asked Horace Busby, to go back in history and find out what all the assassinations of the presidents, not the 20-year gap thing. This is a separate investigation on the part of Busby. He has Busby go back in history and find out what is the common link of all the assassinations. And Busby comes back and says the common link is that the whereabouts of the president were published in the media before he went there, would do enough time for the assassins to read about it in the paper and to do their assassination. And Johnson says, okay, great, thank you. I'm never letting anyone know where I'm going. And from then on out, he doesn't tell the press where he's going ever again, doesn't announce it, disappears, all because he believes that this is how presidential assassinations happen. And Hoover backs him up, but Rowley thinks it's a crock of shit. And he loses faith, like he ever had any, in the Secret Service and begins to lean more heavily. And Hoover does assign Deke Deloach to his travel team as his bodyguard.
All right. Now there's more to it you wanted to go to.
Hold on. Let me see this again. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
War crimes. Should he have been charged with war crimes?
Well, as Curtis LeMay said, if the Japanese had won, Curtis LeMay would have been charged with war crimes. So, I mean, war crimes doesn't go to the winner; it goes to the losers. So, yeah, who knows? I mean, so many people died under LBJ. More people died under LBJ as president than any other president, obviously. That being said, he was drunk when he picked bombing targets. You could say that's a complete dereliction of duty. McNamara, was his sidekick, and McNamara eventually had a mental nervous breakdown and he quit. The generals told him what, not unlike today with Milley and some of these other cats, they told him what he wanted to hear. I mean, that's what these generals did, even though they knew from the Pentagon Papers that the war was unwinnable, going all the way back in time. So if he knows it's unwinnable, I mean, it could have been impeached more likely than war crimes. I mean, that would have been the real way to do it. I mean, he knows the Gulf of Tonkin incident is fraudulent. He knows that's made up. He says so in documents saying this is a bullshit story. But we're in this thing now.
All right, I've got a Rumble rant in here from T. Gaggiotti. Did LBJ have a pet name for Dorothy Kilgallen?
I don't even think she was on the Washington beat at the time. I mean, there were other. She wasn't part of the White House press corps, so I don't think so.
I think it might have been a joke, but.
Who could tell with these people these days?
I don't know. Question: what was the biggest lucky break LBJ had to begin his political career?
Meeting FDR. That was what put him on the map, and his National Youth Association. He became the head of that in Texas around Austin. But meeting up with, being part of the coattails. I'm just generally speaking, I don't know what lucky break he had. I mean, obviously he got the phony Silver Star for flying around on that plane. But I think meeting FDR was what put him on the map.
Well, that started his path to be the master of the Senate, probably.
Yeah.
Ultimately. All right. Question: why did the Kennedy people keep working for LBJ?
They didn't. They bailed. He went to every single one of them and famously said the same speech to each one of them. I need you now more than ever. And he gave them the same song and dance. Each one compared notes. He wouldn't let any of them leave. You know, I mean, Goodwin, Doris Kearns Goodwin's husband, who was a speechwriter, said, I'm out of here. I got a job at like Oberlin or Antioch or something as a professor. And he famously calls him into the office. And, you know, the famous story, of course, is that Richard Goodwin, who was an alcoholic himself, goes to Bill Moyers, part of the Texas crew. And they go to two separate psychiatrists in D.C. without naming their boss. And they describe their boss to the psychiatrists. And they come back and compare notes. And both psychiatrists said their boss is a megalomaniac, pathological liar, sex-addicted alcoholic with low self-esteem and grandiosity. And they both looked at each other and said, we got to get out of here. That's Bill Moyers of PBS and Dick Goodwin, you know, Doris Kearns Goodwin's husband. So Dick Goodwin says, I'm getting a job. I'm getting the F out of here. Because he was a holdover from the other administration. Moyers wasn't. So he goes and resigns. He issues a letter of resignation and goes to Johnson. He says, I got a job at Antioch or Oberlin. I forget which college it was. And he calls him into the office, LBJ, and he says, shipping you out, boy. He goes, what? He goes, yep, you're going into the Bush Charlie Company. He goes, what? He says, yeah, I already put the name in. You got a number here. And he says, here's your number. And he starts quaking in his boots. This is some Harvard, you know, dweeb. And he says, good luck overseas, boy. Good luck. And he goes, wait, Mr. President, what is this? He says, well, you resigned from here. And now you're, you know, you could be subject to the draft. And he starts crying and he's going, please. And he rips up his resignation or you know, ends the resignation and goes back to work reluctantly for LBJ. So, I mean, people did not get out easily, put it that way. He wanted his enemies around him. He wanted it to run like the JFK administration. He wanted to continue the look of the JFK administration for as long as possible. He didn't want RFK around. So, I mean, Katzenbach was really running the Justice Department at that point, Nicholas Katzenbach. And Robert Kennedy had half a foot out the door, if that helps answer that question.
All right, there's a follow-up from before and a clarification. They're saying Reclaiming History is Bugliosi's book.
Oh, that's ridiculous book. In fact, it's so ridiculous that I think Bugliosi is the prosecuting attorney in a TV movie about the trial with Jerry Spence years before the book even came out. No, the book, it's just a longer version of Posner's Case Closed. You know, Bugliosi will be famously destroyed by Tom O'Neill years later in the book Chaos.
And I think DiEugenio's Reclaiming Parkland is in response to the Reclaiming History.
That's why I was confused, because he dismantles righteously the book by Bugliosi in Reclaiming Parkland, the book by Jim DiEugenio.
All right, Marilyn Morgan. Mark, I sent PayPal money to you for the book fund, but did not use the link here. Need to confirm you received it, or did I screw up?
I have to look into it, bro. I'm on a show right now.
Yeah,
but I got my laundry in the dryer, too. I'm going to go deal with that. I really can't do it right now, Marilyn.
I do recommend using the link in the description.
Yeah, use the link in the description. That's the popular one for the book fund.
If you send it to Mark Robert, hey, maybe you made some Mark Robert's day, another Mark Robert on the planet.
$10 worth of heroin somebody just got.
Oh, my. Rustus Android, how early was it that LBJ knew that JFK would be assassinated?
Well, again, I will say how early, I don't know. But June 5th, El Paso, Texas, the Cortez Hotel, after going to the White Sands missile test area to see a missile launched, a U.S. missile for the Air Force. I think Curtis LeMay was there too, oddly enough.
We had that picture, I think.
Right. There is a picture somewhere floating around of that missile test site in White Sands. Anyway, so in El Paso, June 5th, at the Cortez Hotel, 3 men in a room. John Connolly, this is LeMay with, this is at the missile test. Yeah. Johnson and Connolly and JFK are in this room in the Cortez Hotel. And in that meeting, which goes on for a long time, Connolly and LBJ browbeat JFK, he's in the bathtub, I think, into agreeing to coming back to Dallas and Texas, not Dallas specifically, but a tour of Texas in the fall. And JFK says, I'm here now. I'm not coming back again, a couple of months later. And they wouldn't let up. They would not let up until he agreed to come back in the fall. And I think that is the first indication of both men being involved in the plot. And before it happens, where there's actual fingerprints. Of course, this is not in their book, Chokeholds, but it's in my book, in my brain. And that situation where they browbeat JFK into agreeing to come back begins to launch the assassination in Dallas. Now, there's other, obviously, Tampa, Miami, Chicago occurs. It may not have had to happen in Dallas if those other things had been successful, but they weren't. So the Dallas thing, the link to his knowledge or his actions, for me, begins on June 5th in the Cortez Hotel in El Paso.
All right. Question: do you think there was any connection between the murder of JFK and LBJ declining to seek and would not accept the 1968 nomination?
No, I think there's a link between that and the murder of RFK, because, I mean, he's dead 5 years at this point. In 68, he's a beaten man up in New Hampshire. Although he wins, McCarthy comes in second, very close to the president. It would be if the same thing would be if RFK Jr. Comes in, 3 points behind Biden in the New Hampshire primary coming up. I mean, that was the devastation and the shock that LBJ was vulnerable to defeat in 68. Was McCarthy getting within shooting distance of LBJ percentage-wise in New Hampshire?
I'm curious on that because we've talked about it before. You were mentioning how Humphrey almost caught Nixon.
Right, but that's in November.
No. But I was wondering if LBJ had hung in there, do you think he could have pulled it out?
If LBJ had, no, because they had wrapped the war around his neck. And there was such an anti-war fervor. I think Johnson would have been defeated by Nixon. The reason they gave it to Humphrey is the same reason I predict they're going to give it to Newsom. And that is to take the war of Ukraine and Israel and the economy off of the neck of Humphrey in this case. And it'll be the same playbook in terms of Newsom. And I'm still sticking with that prediction based on the fact that the Democrats have done it before. He was sinking in the polls, LBJ. The war was becoming hugely unpopular, and he was a wounded animal. And it's just like Biden. I keep telling people this. It's repeating itself amazingly. And then, of course, the RFK jumps in and tries to unseat McCarthy, who is the real anti-war candidate. Like his son, RFK was all over the map. Pro-war, anti-war, friend to the minorities, against big business, for big business, this and that. It was all over the map. And he does win the California primary, and then he's shot, obviously, that night. But McCarthy, was the leading anti-war candidate at the time. And he had all the college kids working for him, not for Bobby Kennedy.
All right, this is a follow-up earlier on Robert Caro. Blair Stewart wrote in. Robert Caro's editor, Bob Gottlieb, died this year,
Okay.
June 14th. Caro 88 is still with Knopf Doubleday. Caro's been working with the second editor.
There's your answer then. I know.
Okay.
I've been following the story, but that makes sense. I'll accept that.
So 88, Bob, better get writing.
Yeah,
Come
88.
on, Bobby.
What are you mocking him? He's 88. You think that's nice? The guy, Jesus Christ. He probably, dude, if I'm an 88 writing a book, I mean, it's the greatest thing ever could have happened. Just want to give a shout out to Mary Margaret Wiley, who was 21 when LBJ hired her as a secretary and had sex with her repeatedly. Really gorgeous brunette.
Okay. Let me see. Al Gonzalez. Grandpa Al Lewis used to have a radio show in New York City, and he used to play the tapes of LBJ referring to his African-American staff as my negros.
Yeah, I mean, Lenny Bruce famously had a nice work in that evidence room up there, Al, the other day with that lieutenant getting nabbed, by the way. I know you didn't have anything to do with that. But yeah, Lenny Bruce used to do a whole routine where it's really hysterical. It's on a lot of Lenny Bruce records where his staff is training him how to say the word Negro, as opposed to that a combination of Negro and the N-word, which he said is a slurry kind of word. And Lenny Bruce does an incredible impersonation of LBJ, by the way, if you ever get a chance to hear that.
Yeah, well, you were talking about LBJ and his impersonations. I wonder if that son of a bitch would get on the phone and mess with people, if he was that good.
I don't know. I've never heard that. But he did get on the phone with Jackie Kennedy after the assassination on numerous occasions. And this was according to William Manchester, who wrote Death of a President, who will later have a chapter sealed up of Jackie Kennedy. But even in the released version of the book, he keeps calling her in the middle of the night, obviously drunk, and just keeps slurring his words, saying, "Tell Caroline and John, I'd like to be their daddy. Their daddy." And, oh yeah, no. When you hear, dude, it's so dark. And she's like trying to be polite, and he just keeps calling her that she has to come up to the White House. He's calling her at midnight. I mean, it's so sick, so disgusting what he did with her.
Wow. All right. On Rumble, outright mental defective asks, question: didn't LBJ's attorney write a book after LBJ died, essentially laying the assassination on Johnson?
Yeah, in fact, the attorney, his son, was the press secretary for George Bush, the press spokesman. Blood, money, and power. Yeah, he was an attorney with Ed Clark. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was. I knew about Philip K. Nelson, but I didn't know his own attorney.
Oh, no. It came out like in the 2000s, so it was kind of like another clip job, like Roger Stone's book. Although there's some interesting little tidbits in Roger Stone's book too that I never knew. You know, there's some real oddities in there that Roger Stone did come up with. But basically, both books are a clip job at a Phil Nelson's book.
Okay. And Zartha gave us a $10 Rumble rant. Said, great show. Thank you very much. I'll go one more in here. Zartha wants to know, did LBJ know that J. Edgar Hoover was gay? And did he use this info to blackmail him?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just told this story of how he made him on tape explain how he could determine if someone was gay or not. And he drags it out for a long time on the tape, and Hoover is acting gay and walking around the Oval Office limp-wristed and doing a gay sachet in the Oval Office, and he's doing it because he's taping it. I mean, he wanted this recorded, obviously, and that's what he got.
All right. Let me see. I'm going to go into locals just to pull questions early. I'm going to go exclusively to locals later, but definitely want to pull from everywhere. This is a weird one. Why is Mark a good storyteller?
Irish.
All right.
Oh, no. The real answer is I've pitched so many movies in Hollywood as a screenwriter that it becomes second nature to tell a story. Because when you go into you may do 2 pitch meetings a day here, I don't do it anymore, but I'm saying for years, you would be sent by your agent to a studio, and you had to pitch your movie, whatever the hell your movie was, and you had to hold their interest. So you honed the art of the pitch. You know, there was a guy named Bob Cosberg. He produced 12 Monkeys one time, and he used to give seminars. He said he was the king of the pitches, Bob Cosberg. And we went over to Amblin one time, to Spielberg Company, and Bob Cosberg introduced me by saying, "I know you know me, Bob Cosberg. Robert Cosberg is the king of the pitches," but he goes, "It's really Mark." And then I had to pitch the head of Spielberg's company this baseball picture with Ed Burns, which didn't go well. But the point of the matter is, you hone this by having to own the room and tell a story in 20, 25 minutes of a 3-act movie. So if that makes any sense. But then I've also got a family of storytellers, so it's genetic.
Yeah, but I mean, I can see how critical that would be, because you're trying to convince money people, essentially, I'm guessing, to picture this movie that you want to see.
I'll tell you something. Even better than that. I walked into Michael Douglas's company when I first came out here, and as I was driving somewhere, my agent said, "You've got a meeting at Michael Douglas's company." And I said, "I don't have any project." So I made it up on the way over. It was the Alan Bakke affirmative action case. It was like a takeoff on the Michael Douglas movie where what was it called? Where he walks out of the car. He's an angry white guy.
Falling down.
It was like, this was after Falling Down came out. So it was for Michael Douglas to play Alan Bakke. And I got paid just from going into an office. And I said, "This is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life." And I was hooked. I swear to God, I never told you this. And I got paid from just going into a guy's office, telling him a story I made up on the 405, stuck in traffic. I mean, I knew the Alan Bakke story, and I got a check for that. And it was never made, but it went into development or whatever happened to it. And I said, "Oh, I could do this all day. This is freaking great." And that was the beginning of my career in Hollywood.
Well, is that a rule of thumb, that never turn down a pitch opportunity, even if you don't have anything?
Absolutely. Oh, dude, are you kidding? I mean, because you may meet them. Dude, I was in a meeting one time with this gay guy over at Sony, and I pitched something. I don't even remember what it was. And the guy couldn't care less what I was pitching. And he says, "Now let me pitch you something." I go, "What?" And he goes, "Yes, I had a dream last night, and it was the time of the OJ trial. And there was 15 dancing Judge Itos, Japanese Judge Itos. Would you be interested in writing a musical about the OJ trial with dancing Judge Itos?" And I said, "You know what? Let me go to the bathroom. I'll be right back." And I went to the bathroom, walked out the door, got in my car, and drove home.
Which was probably the safest thing you could do. Jim Panegas in Locals explains Boxing Day, which I asked about earlier. It's a holiday celebrated after Christmas, occurring on the second day of Christmastide. Though originated as a holiday to give gifts to people in need, today it forms part of Christmas celebrations, with many people choosing to take advantage of sales.
What is it? Chinese Boxing Day?
Well,
is it about the Boxing Rebellion or something?
No, it's just I think it's a matter of, somebody else earlier had said it was giving presents to their staff or whatever. So I guess you celebrate Christmas, and then what? If you have a bounty, you help people in need. I don't know. I don't know the origin.
I want to tell you how people say, "Well, why can't they go after Johnson now?" Right? And there's a Courtney Valenti still runs Warner Brothers, or she did up until a couple of years ago. And she was the illegitimate child, so they say, of Jack Valenti, who ran the Motion Picture Association of America. And her mother had an affair, according to the folklore, with LBJ producing her. So she was a gatekeeper for many years. And, she was there when Oliver Stone, was working. And the story that I liked the best was a former president of CNN was a guy named Tom Johnson. And Tom Johnson was no longer at CNN when Roger Stone was trying to go on CNN and promote his new book. Remember we saw Roger Stone at that Trump event? Okay, so Roger Stone goes to go on CNN. CNN gets a call from Tom Johnson. Don't put Roger Stone on that channel. Well, why not? What are you doing now, Tom Johnson? I'm the head of the LBJ library.
That figures. And by the way, that tailored out nicely. I was going to ask you, Patsy SF said, have LBJ's children ever turned on him, including Courtney Valenti?
That's funny. I mean, a couple of years ago, they began a campaign to eliminate the Vietnam War, not eliminate it, but to begin to eliminate it from his legacy. And his daughters came out at the LBJ library famously saying, if it wasn't for the Vietnam War, he would have been the greatest president in the history of the United States. And they just said, we have to begin to imagine him as such. And they began a type of revival of him with Obama going there. And I guess it was around the time of Obama, because he went there and gave some award to somebody and said something that LBJ was his hero and blah, blah, blah.
Okay. This is from way earlier. It's on Locals. Until It's Empty said, for you to rinse with Listerine several times per day in conjunction with saline nasal rinse, followed by butacyanide spray twice daily.
I'm not stuffed up. I mean, I don't have a sinus problem. I just have a slight cough and shortness of breath at this point. So all of those things, which may be to help someone, may not be applicable to my situation at this time. But thanks. Thank you.
And I think this is a joke.
Right.
Professor Tom, knowing the source, so I'm sure it's a joke. How many times did Dorothy Kilgallen sleep with LBJ?
I don't think she did, but I'll tell you who did. Was David Brinkley's wife, who got left behind at a party. This is from Huntley Brinkley, the Huntley Brinkley report. David Brinkley was at the ranch and left his wife behind. He had to fly back to New York to do the NBC News with Huntley Brinkley report. And he left his wife behind. So she was sleeping in one of the guest bedrooms, and he did the famous, this here is your president, honey, move over. And he pulled up the blanket and got in and had his way with Mrs. Brinkley.
All right. The Real Terry said, I recently noticed that the character Buck Strickland on King of the Hill series often holds meetings while on the John and is a corrupt philanderer. Was Buck Strickland based on LBJ?
I don't know who Buck Strickland is. I don't watch the show, so I can't really. I don't watch King of the Hill, so.
Isn't that
I don't watch it.
Okay, yeah, it probably is. I mean, he's very famous for being on the toilet, when doing that. I don't know of any other politicians that were famously on the toilet talking to reporters.
No, but somebody asked us the other day about Jumbo and how would anybody know about Jumbo? And I said, well, he kept taking Jumbo out everywhere in congressional, especially the men's rooms in Congress. And a lot of people saw Jumbo, and Jumbo was named by his own brother as Jumbo. So somebody was doubting the accuracy of the name Jumbo, but that was the origin of it.
Sure. Okay, Pasha. People really were ignorant, willfully or not, of the misdeeds of LBJ.
Yeah.
Besides Biden blindness, how many connecting dots are there between that phenomenon and the situation today?
There's quite a few. I mean, there's a war. I mean, the economy's going into the shitter. You've got a corrupt president who literally is running a crime family. They're kind of endless. I mean, they're both Southern senators originally, Delaware, I guess. Is that South, Eric, considered borderline, a border state or whatever,
yeah,
right?
It's a weird one because Delmarva is kind of tied in the area.
I mean, there is somebody could write a book. Let me just put it that way. The similarities between the two men. You really could. One had been the vice president. The other was a vice president.
And there may be more parallels if Biden drops out at the. Grip Van Wrinkled question: was LBJ politically scared of Nixon?
You know what? I don't think he's scared, but he looked at Nixon. And I thought about this last night. I was reading something about Nixon. He looked at Nixon as an equal, and he wasn't scared of him, but he looked at him as an equal level player, respected him as an even level man as a president. Which you have to do when you see the landslides, that Nixon won by. Of course, he'll be dead by 72, LBJ, but nevertheless, he respected the darkness of Nixon. Let me put it that way.
Well, and also Nixon had been a vice president
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't lose by much to Kennedy.
Right. Well, they both had
Congressman.
multiple seats in the government. They were very similar on opposite sides of the opposite parties. There's a lot of similarities between the two.
Yeah, except for the honest versus the grift.
Well, I don't think Nixon took money, but and I don't think Nixon was an alcoholic, and but they were both involved in the same war. You know, they both won by landslides. You know, I mean, there's a lot of similarities. I am not a crook. I'll just say this, Eric.
Well, I was going to say
got this. This is a cloth coat. I have a dog named Checkers. I am not a crook. I shop at the custom shop where this guy Mark keeps laying on ties. I don't even want these goddamn ties anymore, Eric.
Okay, but we got to say one thing. At least the Nixon landslide wasn't being ironic compared to one of Lyndon's.
Right. Well, that's true. But Lyndon did win by the biggest landslide originally in political history before these other landslides.
Right. All right. Alex Davy Duke. The stories about LBJ corruption were a threat to make certain LBJ helps with JFK killing and doing deep state bidding, DP insurance.
No, I mean, but he was going to go down. He was going to go to jail. I don't know if you need any more insurance than that. He also had the ticking clock of a bad ticker because of the genetics of his heart. So he had that problem of his father dying young constantly, and the fear of the heart giving out, which it does eventually. But I think the fear of going to jail, because the stuff going to Life magazine is coming out of the Justice Department by Robert Kennedy, who hates LBJ's guts. And I believe LBJ was involved in the assassination of RFK, which we'll get into in a later episode. But these two men really hated each other's guts. And he was leaking, RFK as Attorney General was leaking all this stuff to Republicans and to Life magazine, which is where Life magazine got the information to publish the December 1st issue about the corruption of LBJ, which is what would have been published December 1st, if not for the assassination of his brother.
All right. Big Steve on Rumble said, can you give a short list of accurate and informative books about LBJ? Well, Caro.
No. I'll give you a better one. LBJ, Architect of the American Ambition, by Randall Woods, is really one, if you want a balanced one of corruption and success. I mean, Caro kind of tilts towards his success and some darkness, but read the Randall Woods book, and obviously the Philip Nelson book, Mastermind of the Assassination. Those two would be really great to start out with.
All right. David Parsons, wasn't there supposed to be an STD named after Lyndon?
I don't know. It could be. I mean, he never really got sick from STDs, as far as I know. There might have been something that happened to him, but I've never seen any record of that. All I know is he would pick up and leave so no one would know where he was going out of fear of getting assassinated, which I didn't realize years ago.
Theatrax Entertainment. Besides pork barrel politics, what motives did LBJ have to get the Houston Space Center?
Money. No, it's pure money. I mean, or also early on, he was in charge of the CIA, money for the CIA at the beginning with another congressman. So he had that from 49 at the beginning, but it was, pork barrel politics, to get money for the defense industry down there. Got involved in the THX fighter jet controversy, General Dynamics, and don't forget Brown and Root. I mean, Brown and Root, the Brown brothers, George Brown and Herman Brown, which was famously Brown and Root, which becomes Halliburton. They were his main benefactors. That and Bell Helicopter, which when he signs National Security Action Memo 273, giving them the Vietnam War, Bell Helicopter was on the balls of their ass, and Brown and Root was dredging, swamps in Texas. They weren't really as big as they would be. When they eventually go into Vietnam, Brown and Root, and begin doing work over there, the company grows enormously. until it's run by a strange man later on named Dick Cheney, who becomes CEO of Halliburton. Halliburton being the same company with a different name, run by Dick Cheney, also out of Texas, who moves to Wyoming so he could be on the ballot with the guy he was researching to find a vice president for. So Halliburton,
well, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, Halliburton figures a lot into this as the original company of Brown and Root.
All right. Dustin wants to know, how do you interpret the relationship and interactions between LBJ and key figures like J. Edgar Hoover and others in the context of Johnson's involvement in the Kennedy assassination?
Well, I mean, Hoover and LBJ had a relationship, lived across the street from each other for 20 some odd years. That's number one. And they were neighbors, number two. And he knew that Hoover was compromised by people who gave donations, quote unquote, to LBJ every year, namely Carlos Marcello, who would provide about $50,000 a year to LBJ. So Marcello knew, and he was able to provide information to LBJ about J. Edgar Hoover. I think it originally comes from the mob through Marcello to LBJ. Is just my guess. There's some books that indicate that Marcello was the source of the information to LBJ.
All right. This isn't really LBJ. I'll let it go because RFK is involved. Question, Mark, would you visit Sirhan?
Of course.
Would you be welcome? I don't know.
You mean in this particular climate right now? I mean, think about that. I mean, I was persona non grata when he found that I was Jewish, Sirhan. But it's so funny because in the parole hearing, they said, you know, we'd like you to say right here and now that you would refrain from politics, Palestinian Middle East politics, as that you could be used by them as a lightning rod. Will you agree to that? And he says no. So I said, oh, dude, just shut the fuck up already.
Yeah. Okay, Lady Fair Freddie. This one's kind of tough to read. I think there's some typos, but SNL should ask, I'm going to guess, how Tucker's skit outdone anything they've done in years. I'm just.
What's a medio?
I don't know.
See, I'm telling you, we need the Enigma machine, Hunter.
I know we do, but
we have to run this through AI and see what comes out on the other end. What's FBE LBJ references?
Catch the. I don't know.
You need the Enigma machine.
Well, but you know, that's why I do think that, you know, several people commented that Tucker outdid Saturday Night Live. That could have been a SNL skit from back when they were funny.
You mean with Kevin Spacey?
Oh yeah, as Frank
Underwood. Kevin Spacey's name in that super chat?
I don't know that his name was in there. It was. I couldn't quite understand it all. Maybe that's it. Kevin Spacey. I don't know.
Okay.
It was a great skit.
Give a shout out to Helen Gahagan Douglas, Ileana Douglas's grandmother, who was LBJ mistress and the congressman from Hollywood who had a years-long affair with LBJ while in Congress, and he had sex with her in one of his offices the same day as the FDR funeral. I just want to put in more stuff about the ladies of LBJ that I found. There she is, Helen Gahagan Douglas, a star of stage and screen. I think she might have been the head of the Screen Actors Guild at one point, maybe not, but she was the congresswoman out of Hollywood. She would later run against Nixon. Famously, he branded her the Pink Lady. She was a communist. Melvin Douglas, the famous actor, there's her granddaughter, Ileana Douglas, who had a long-time affair with Martin Scorsese, which put her career on the map. And I don't know, she kind of disappeared, but she worked a lot, Ileana Douglas, for years. There she is with Marty. During Marty's cocaine phase, you see the nose looks a little white around the nostrils there. But I'm not going to watch that film. I'm not going to watch his Indian film. I just read too many. By the way, the guy, Armin White, is my go-to guy, National Review. He's a black guy conservative named Armin White, who's the film critic there, and it's the only film critic at National Review that Rotten Tomatoes will allow to post. Because he's legit. They won't accept anyone else. Oddly enough, I read this little thing on Rotten Tomatoes the other day. Anyway, so he just completely trashed the film.
Great. All right, Dick Dickerson, how freaking cool is it that my name sent Mark on a 10-minute dissertation on the Dickerson surname? I'm playing the lottery now. This is why this show rules. Can't believe my mom banged LBJ.
Well, look, Nancy, she was smoking hot. Your mom, your brother John, obviously, had a pretty good career. I mean, clearly he was a Nepo baby. But the scene as I wrote it in the LBJ script, which eventually we're going to AI as the script, is really one of my favorite scenes in that movie, because he prowls around the hotel room after her, chasing her around the TV, not running, but in slow motion. He and his wife, Lady Bird's in the other room. She knew all of these mistresses, by the way, in case the women at home, what did his wife think? She knew every one of them. She was super polite to every one of his mistresses. She was a Southern, a gracious woman to all of them. She never said a bad word about any of the hundreds of women he was having sex with, all right, including this guy's mother.
All right. Well, Lady Freddie wants to address her earlier.
Okay, you're back now. Sure, Lady Freddie.
Damn, my super chat went wrong. I'm shaming SNL. Simple is better when your eyes get old.
Okay. All right. I'll take that as a moral victory.
And thank you very much. J.A. Will, supposedly the 20-year curse of the Shawnee prophet started in 1840 with William Henry Harrison up to 1960 and JFK. He was the brother of Tecumseh, who Harrison defeated at the Battle of Tippecanoe. Okay.
Well, that's a long way to go for $10, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's hard to make the 20-year curse. I mean, it was
more like 120 if you're talking about 1840 to 1960.
Is this guy saying that the 1860 curse goes back 20 years before that?
Maybe, or I don't know, or it's all tied together, but like it's a 120, not 20. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
I do my best. Warrior Big Mouth. Question: was LBJ the principal architect of NSAM?
No, it was the generals. It was the generals who wrote it. He just signed it, while Kennedy was downstairs in the rotunda, reversing 263. He didn't write it. No, that was part of the quid pro quo. And anyone who believes that he was not involved, he would have had to have woken up that day and just decided to sign some random presidential action memo that was presented before him without any haste or waste. I mean, I don't know how Oliver Stone gets around it, but 273 is put before him so quickly. Kennedy's body's not even cold yet. It's literally less than 72 hours after the assassination. I think it's like Monday or Tuesday morning.
Yeah, definitely. Chris Watson, are you familiar with the song Superbird by Country Joe and the Fish? It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a man insane. It's my president, LBJ.
I am not, but I do know Seven McDonald. Seven is her name. She's a woke writer here in Silver Lake, who is Country Joe McDonald's daughter, if that helps at all. Her name is Seven.
Okay.
All right.
I love how it's like, I don't have an answer, but I can name
I could. You were asking about Country Joe and the Fish. That's the only connection I can make.
I do kind of want to check that song out now, though, because that is funny. Alfarius, $50 Australian. Thank you very much. Hope you both have a happy new year. I hope you do as well. And hello to Wednesday in Australia. Thank you very much. We're moving on to Thomas Kiefaber. 12 Monkeys was filmed at my theater, The Senator in Baltimore. A cool film. Loved Willis, Miss Stowe, and Terry Gilliam. I saw LBJ's daughter, by the way, at MPAA receptions in D.C. Tall, big ears, etc. Okay.
Well, we've covered George Hamilton telling me a little bit about that relationship with LBJ's daughter. You're some kind of a Daniel Boone, ain't you, boy? When he forced George Hamilton to take out a deer upon landing his jet at the LBJ ranch. He wanted George with his daughter. George. He wanted George to be his son-in-law really badly. And George had other women to fry, so he moved on. But George told me some interesting stories about LBJ, which I think we've covered somewhere in the other episodes.
Yeah, probably Ladies of, or I mean, we've definitely covered. Irish Iran. Anyone who doubts what a classless piece of crap LBJ was should listen to the phone recording between him and the tailor where he's talking about his bunghole and where his nuts hang between burps.
Well, he never professed to be a class conscious to defend LBJ. I mean, he never pretended to be an Ivy League classical elite. I mean, that was him acting normally. And why a lot of people loved LBJ. I mean, in a small room, in a small place. I'll tell you something else that I learned. There was recently there was a secret project, 1938. It was launched in 1940 called Operation Texas. And I think there were 400 Jews living in Austin at the time, 400 Jewish families. And they came to LBJ about the Jews that were trapped in Eastern Europe and Nazi Germany. And LBJ put together a team to get them. He got 42 of them out of Nazi Germany using phony documents and phony passports. It was never revealed until 1963 that LBJ did that when they dedicated a synagogue in Austin, and he was there. And these people came up to him who were the survivors' children and thanked him quietly for doing that. So there's more to this guy than meets the eye.
All right. Brian D said this. Interesting. Gerald Ford died today in 2006. One of the JFK dots.
Oh, he's a big dot, obviously. I mean, I was just watching that Chevy Chase movie and I kept thinking of Gerald Ford, the Christmas Vacations. But of course, I mean, Gerald Ford, there's two things I wanted to say. Gerald Ford famously changes the sketches, the autopsy sketches. We don't have any autopsy notes because the doctors burn their notes, of course, as most doctors do. But the sketches themselves for the Warren Commission were altered by Gerald Ford, and he moved the famous upper right back wound of Kennedy to the back of his neck to make it traverse out of the front of the throat. And when asked why he did it, he said, for the good of the American people. And I thought, well, here's an honest guy. He played for, Michigan football, and he was an all-American. And he's probably a straight shooter. Not as straight as somebody who shot Kennedy in the throat. I mean, that's a straight shot from the overpass, as Hunley and I saw when we were up there. But nevertheless, there are people who had to do their bidding and get paid off. And one of the payoffs was eventually Vice President and then President Ford. But the other one I think that's of interest, who's been maligned over the years, is Senator Arlen Specter. And I think Arlen Specter needs to be reevaluated a little bit because Arlen Specter, to his credit, demanded to put LBJ under oath during the Warren Commission, and it was rejected. All of a sudden, Hunley, plot twist. I'll tell you something else that he demanded. He demanded to see the autopsy photos, and he was rebuffed again by Dulles and Warren. And I'll tell you something else, Arlen Specter, in his defense. He was told there were 3 shots, make it work. 3 things that I did not know or I've forgotten about Arlen Specter in his defense. He was a lowly prosecutor out of Philadelphia. He was in over his head. He was a kid trying to make his bones. He was told to take these 3 shots and make them work by the overlords. He also was rebuffed on those 2 other factors where he wanted LBJ under oath and he wanted to see the autopsy photos. So it's not for a lack of trying. Arlen Specter has been maligned savagely over the years, but there may have been more to the man than history has led us to believe.
Kind of like LeMay? No.
Well, I mean, Specter didn't kill anybody, but...
Well, I don't know.
That
He
we
was in
know
the
of.
world. We could have been a war vet. I don't know. Anyway, crazy. Eric R's following up on earlier. Lincoln 1860, Garfield 1880, McKinley 1900, Hardy 1920, Roosevelt 1940, Kennedy 1960. So I guess every 20 years of death. All died in office as president, and maybe tying it to Indian curse.
I don't want. I don't want to say anything, but I think Roosevelt might have died a little later.
Good point.
I mean, I'm no history expert, but again, this was about what LBJ was researching was vice presidents replacing assassinated presidents. I think that was what he was looking for.
Well, I thought it was just dead presidents, period.
Well, dead or replacing them. He was trying to justify taking the vice presidential job.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Mo Bishop said these typos are a YouTube anomaly.
Well, I don't know if they're an anomaly. I mean, do they happen on the other thing on Rumble?
Well, typos happen everywhere.
Yeah,
I make them myself.
Why is it a YouTube anomaly?
I don't know. Let's see. Pat M. True story. As kid holidays with family, Detroit to Cali through Dallas. One trip sat next to lady. She told me was LBJ's secretary. Didn't want to move to DC. Her words, LBJ didn't like those Kennedy boys. Is in the 70s. Story she knew. I guess.
Boy, oh boy, yeah. And that just changed my whole outlook on the thing. It really did. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what is happening here.
Yes, we have heard that he did not like the Kennedy boys.
We have heard that, and RFK specifically, I think he respected, to be honest, I think he respected JFK and hated RFK.
And it was mutual. Anakinus, question from Greece. How in 1963 high and middle rank military mobilized for an assassination and AIK has not a clue? For you, it's impossible. I'm kind of lost.
This is Greek to me, but I love the British island of Hydra. And when I go to Greece, I like to go to Hydra. No motorized vehicles are allowed on the former British island of Hydra, now obviously owned by Greece. One of the best of the Greek islands. And Athens is a shithole.
Okay. Oh, okay. I get it here. Somebody's clarifying again.
What?
The presidential death thing was that every president elected or re-elected in a year ending in 0 died in office until Reagan.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, thank you. I
didn't.
Nicely. There we go. Somebody tidied it up very well to where I completely understand that now. So that makes sense. Thank you very much, Daniel. And
what are you, some kind of a Daniel Boone boy?
Come on,
Bobby.
Like
oh, who did he do that with? He did it with someone else. I was just reading about it. He did the shotgun thing. He took someone else hunting for deer, and he told him that Bobby Kennedy bagged 2 of them, and you could do better than that. I forgot who he was talking about. I'll remember it before the show's over.
Well, you better remember quickly because Oswald's about to lead us over to a locals after party.
That was quick.
Yeah, it's just a fun, laid-back evening, chilling out, asking questions. And you guys, hey, you may want to join us on Locals. It's free to follow. If you want to support us, give yourself a Christmas present that you want. Consider supporting us there. Mark has a PayPal. Mark has a Venmo. I have a PayPal. I have a Venmo. All of these options.
Yeah, just don't send them to random PayPal accounts. I think it's in the description, Eric says.
It is. In a hint, it's going to be Lord Buckley if it's Mark.
If it says that, but yeah. Okay, so where are we with the AI project? I just wanted to get an update.
AI is underway, still shooting for the end of January.
Oh, my. Okay. Surprise me, Hunley. Oh,
I mean, it's called consistency.
Surprise me, Hunley. And what happens when we go over to Locals? We could say whatever we want. Anything goes. We could say the S word.
We definitely could say the multisyllabic S word.
Dogs and cats living together. Anything goes, right?
Most things go. Yes, absolutely.
Let me ask you something. When the show's over, when Locals is over,
Mhm.
They can't find locals unless they're doing it live now, right?
They can always go to locals.
And see
As
what we're doing in a couple of minutes.
they could go now, they could go later, they could go
Oh,
a
okay,
week
all
from
right.
now.
Some woman was asking me. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no. The show's
she
going to
couldn't-
stay up there on locals. Now, I will tell you, if you're watching this and you want to
Mhm.
catch the after party, you'll have to scroll through to get the after party because the version of this on locals is longer than anywhere else. So
Last
just
time we
go-
almost ran out of time, but Hunley, through his lobbying efforts with locals, apparently has changed the locals constitution of the United States.
just enough to where we did slide it in, but
Yeah.
it is fun. I hope you guys do consider going over there. We usually have a couple hundred people there hanging out. We're at 217 right now, waiting. There's some tips, some other questions that'll be exclusive to there. Again, follow us for free there. We appreciate
I
it.
just want to give you one last lady of LBJ, Mary Femer. And he loved Mary Femer, LBJ. And in 1962, he asked her to bear him a child in exchange for a setup in a penthouse in New York. And she was a religious Catholic and turned him down. And it only made him more intense to get her to bear him a child. Later on, I think somebody did, but Mary Femer was pressed upon by LBJ to bear him a child in 1962.
On that happy note.
And more, we'll talk about it more when we get on. I don't want to tease you, but we'll be talking about incredibly insane sexualized things by LBJ on locals that we can't talk about here. Dark, dark stuff that YouTube would never allow the president of the United States to be discussed on YouTube, but we can talk about it on locals. But don't come over, whatever. Don't even bother. Don't even come over there because it's going to be really salacious and dark. And who the hell wants to hear that, right after Christmas?
True.